Hi, everyone, and welcome to Reimagine Agriculture, the podcast where we explore the future of farming, food, and rural life across Europe through the eyes of the people shaping it. I'm Teresa Carvalho, and in this series, we'll meet people from across Europe who are reshaping the future of agriculture. Today, we're joined by Ignazio Corral, Senior Policy and Advocacy Manager at the European Food Banks Federation, also known as FEBA. Hi, Ignazio.
Hello, thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much. First of all, for listeners who might not be familiar with FEBA, could you explain a little bit more about its mission and its role across Europe's food system?
Yeah, of course. I would start by the name. So FEBA is a French acronym of Fédération Européenne de Banque Alimentaire. And yeah, it's a French acronym because the federation was actually born in France 40 years ago. So this year is actually our 40th anniversary. So it's an important, we're going to have an important celebration in Paris in a couple of months. And yeah, the federation was born to basically try and solve a big paradox we have in Europe and all over the world, where there is a huge amount of surplus food that goes to landfill that is still wasted, while on the other side there are millions of people that struggle to have a decent meal every day. So food banks work on this intersection, and we represent this movement, this network of more than 350 food banks across 30 European countries, because we are a European federation. And our networks or our food banks work with more than 100,000 volunteers and 40,000 charitable organizations that were able last year, for example, to redistribute almost 1 million tons of surplus food to more than 12 million people in Europe. So it's a huge work made by especially by volunteers, and people dedicate their time to help others.
Great. I mean, this really highlights how FEBA operates at the intersection of food systems, social policy, sustainability, both locally and across Europe, which is also linked to broader EU objectives, particularly under the Common Agricultural Policy, which aims to balance agricultural production with environmental and social outcomes. As you mentioned, one of the things FEBA is most known for is its work on the ground, especially connecting food surplus with people in need. And that process is unfortunately not very visible to people outside the system. Could you explain how food redistribution works in practice?
Oh wow! I mean, there is actually surplus food that is generated at at basically every stage of the food chain. So it starts from the farm level, so from the production level with unharvested crops, then with industry. Overproduction, which is getting better, but there's still a lot. And then, of course, in retails, that's also getting. I mean, it's getting better, but still there's a huge quantity of food that is wasted also at the retail level. And then there is the households, but at that level we can't do much. There are other ways to try and address it, and there are rules and objective at the European level to reduce it. But on the other level, we can do a lot together with the producers and the industry and retailers to reduce food waste, or at least to use that surplus food to feed the millions of people in Europe that need it. Food banks act as basically as a logistic hubs. So our network has got the capacity to store food, to comply with the food safety rules. So to use the fridges and to guarantee that transport of food is made under the food safety and food hygiene rules. To check the quality and safety of the food that is distributed, and then of course it works as a middle player between those who have surplus food and the charitable organization in many countries that then have contact and direct and do the direct distribution to end beneficiaries, so the people in need.
So this makes it quite clear that redistribution relies on a very structured process where storage and logistics are just as important as the availability of the food itself. But you touched on this already. But who are the main actors involved in the system and how do they coordinate?
uh, there are a lot, like yeah, I was mentioning, like every stage. So of course, like farmers, I think farmers are actually underused but very strategic actors, as they could provide surplus at the primary production stage, but much of it is still not recovered because there are not there's no support to harvest food that does not, let's say, market demand. Then there is the food industry, that is the basically the actor that provide the bigger volumes of surplus food through stable partnership with food banks at national level, but also, I mean, we help that kind of connection. The retail sector and food banks act as, the hub, the coordination center of this system, and charitable organization and NGOs, parish, those actors that know and are in contact with the people in need are there. Those, together with the public authorities, that work on the distribution of surplus food.
So, what we're really seeing is a system that brings together multiple actors across different parts of the food chain, and that coordination between all of them isn't always easy. What's interesting here is that this isn't only a logistical system, but also a policy question, because whether food surplus can be effectively redistributed often depends on the regulatory and funding environment set at EU level. How could tools like the Common Agricultural Policy help turn that surplus into an opportunity for redistribution?
The Common Agricultural Policy, I think, has a huge, unexplored, untapped potential to help this, to help solving this paradox. As for example, there is no provision of a mechanism of helping farmers harvest the food that is not demanded by the market. So this is food that would be perfectly edible and perfectly useful to help people that need more food, and food banks could help a lot to, let's say, put in contact and distribute this surplus food to people in need. But to do that, we need to combine what are the provision, for example, of the Waste Framework Directive that is now under the transposition process, that clearly states that the food hierarchy put human consumption first. So, if we combine that provision with the CAP and what the future CAP should be, we could think, or we could imagine a system where the institutions help farmers harvest that surplus food, which is actually food loss that occupy soils and an impact also on the environment and all the food system, and use the infrastructure of food banks that need more food to be redistributed through the charitable organization and other NGOs to people in need. So if the new common agricultural policy will, let's say have a mechanism of support for farmers to do that, like to do that harvesting of food that is perfectly edible but not fit to be sold or not demanded for the market. This would be a great help to, let's say, reduce the number of people in need of decent meals every day.
FEBA has been quite active on this front, including through your from farm to food bank proposal, which looks at how CAP funding could help cover the costs that farmers face when donating surplus food, with the aim of eliminating food waste at a farm level. What are the biggest logistical or regulatory barriers you face when redistributing this surplus food?
There are still, unfortunately, there are still a lot. I mean, the reason why I'm here and I'm working as a policy and advocacy manager is because we need to address a number of issues at the European and national level. Actually, what we are doing is, together with Harvard University, is mapping country by country. Is a project that is called the Global Atlas on Food Donation. So we're mapping country by country, like the framework of food donation, in order to understand what needs to be, what is working, what is not, what needs to be addressed. And there are a number of things that are actually, let's say, impeding food banks to distribute more food and to help solve the paradox I was referring to before. We have economic barriers because, of course, food recovery and redistribution have real costs, so need to be also supported somehow. There are tax barriers on food donation. There are problems of rules with, let's say, liability, and also labels, also distribution from one country to the other for neighboring countries. We're still, I mean, we are inside a union that is not perfect, and we still have different rules from country to country. And those are little examples, but there are other things that somehow, let's say, impede or represent a barrier for food banks to correctly operate or to increase the quantity of food that can be recovered and be distributed to people.
So this points to a key issue. Surplus food exists, but the conditions to redistribute it are not always in place. Has the system become more efficient in recent years, or are needs growing faster than the capacity?
Yeah, to some extent, I would say yes. Probably lots of food operators uh, became more efficient in terms of surplus food that they produce, and there are different systems that they created. That could be, offers for food that gets closer to expiry date, or app that sell food that way. From a food bank's point of view, we've noticed during the last years that the quantity of surplus has been decreasing, even if not that much, but there is a decrease ongoing. And on the other side, the number of people in need has been increasing. So even if we manage to reduce surplus food, let's say, to a good point, because I don't think it could go to zero, but it can be substantially reduced, and it's in the process. There still will be the other problem of feeding people and helping people who cannot afford decent meals because of a number of reason, like increasing cost of life and other current expenses that make life difficult for a lot of Europeans. So we still need to find food to distribute and help, and that's why the unexplored, for example, food loss scheme, like food that can be harvested, can be a solution. But there are others that can bring more food to food banks to be distributed. We have also, as food banks, we had like new ideas, new digital tools that helped our network to be more efficient in the distribution and in the recovery, like virtual food banking. So sometimes food banks are not storing the food in warehouses and in fridges, but they just guarantee that the surplus food that is that has like some food actors, the industry or retailers, goes directly to the charitable organization, and there is an app or a digital tool that help that connection. This helps also to distribute more food, to save food, surplus food, and distribute it.
So, this raises the broader question about whether current systems are keeping pace with changing demands. If we zoom out from the system itself, it becomes clear that food redistribution is ultimately responding to a much broader challenge, which is food insecurity. From your experience, what are the main drivers of food insecurity today, and have you seen any changes in these in recent years?
Unfortunately, for a number of reasons, there are not really control, like, global crisis, COVID, the Russian aggression in Ukraine, and also, what's going on now with the war. There are consequences in terms of cost of living and prices, also food price, that it creates problems and increase somehow the number of people that now need to be supported. A lot of people, I mean, we still, as Europeans, sometimes we think, or at least we have the attitude of thinking that people who receive food support are only people in extreme poverty, but actually it's not like that. There are a lot of students that ask for food support. There are a lot of workers that have to choose between paying their bills, paying their rent, or buying food. There are separated parents. There are a lot of people that are actually, in the imagination of most Europeans, are not end beneficiaries of food support, but actually they are. So we're talking about more than 40 million people in Europe that need food support or cannot afford a decent meal every other day. Then there is also the broader question of what you are eating, because if you have a very low budget for buying food, you will probably eat unhealthy food that has consequences in terms of health, in terms of your mental health, your ability to be working properly and to be included in all the social aspects of your life, to have the right nutrition. It's not only food, it's the right food to be moving. It's extremely important, it's crucial, and it's something that needs to be considered in all the different uh, actions and talks that there are about eradicating poverty and social inclusion in Europe.
I mean, from what you said, it's clear that food insecurity is not an isolated issue, but closely linked to wider economic and social developments. And this issue is not affecting all groups equally. Do you see specific challenges affecting younger generations when it comes to accessing affordable and nutritious food? And how could policies like the CAP help in this regard?
Yeah, yeah. As I was mentioning, we have an important department here at FEVA that collects data, and among the data, we know that end beneficiaries in are students among them. There are young people, and as I was saying, I mean, if you're not eating well, if you don't get nutritious food, or you have consequences in terms of focusing, being in the right with the right mental and physical health to do your things, to study, to work, to develop your abilities, your career. So it's crucial that public programs, also inside the CAP, which is part of a broader objectives of the public institutions, it's still one of the most important European Union program, and let's say European project, the CFP. There is space to support the right nutrition of especially young people who are the future of this continent and this union.
So, what we've discussed so far shows that food redistribution is not just about logistics, but also shaped by political decisions. So, concretely, what policy changes would make the biggest difference for food redistribution and access to food in Europe?
Any legislative change that remove barriers and facilitate food donation, it's helpful to those goals. And yeah, the waste framework directive is one of those. It's I mean, to that extent, we have like this objective, these goals for 2030. Probably there will be a new one for 2035, but still there are other pieces of legislation, especially connected with agriculture, that can help a lot. We were mentioning the common agricultural policy. Definitely, if we manage to have a mechanism of incentives or support for farmers to harvest food that they would not, because that's no market demand, because it's not fit to sell, that would mean having more food to be distributed. Then something can be foreseen inside the common market organization, the EU food school scheme. And also there is important in terms of nutrition and balanced meals, and also to use in public procurement surplus food when it's edible would be a solution to reduce food waste and help the redistribution process. And another interesting point that could be explored and could help is also the strategic food stocks that will be foresee for every EU member state. I mean, that food that need to be stored by member state, especially dairy products and fruit and vegetables. When food will get close to expiry dates, this food need to be rotated, and food banks can help rotating that food stocks and distribute it to people in need. So if we manage to go to that direction, this would help both to have all the time fresh food and edible food in the food stocks, in the strategic food stocks, and on the other side to help the redistribution and not wasting that food, sending it to landfills.
Thank you so much for these insights. I mean, as you said, with discussions on the future CAP ongoing, this is particularly relevant. And now, looking to the future, what gives you hope when you think about the evolution of Europe's food systems?
I mean, information and collection of data is key. So once institutions, policymakers, lawmakers are more aware of what's going on, how many people are in need, how much food is still wasted, what are the goals to make all the system more sustainable, what's the cost for the public system. I mean, all this information are super important in order to address the problems and those issues correctly. What we can do, it's helping. I mean, helping solving those paradox without using that the public resources that would be needed instead. Imagine if we should to use public money to have more than 100,000 people working on surplus food redistribution. It would be a huge expenses. And then there is also, I mean, the social return of the investment on food banks. So we have figures that said €1 invested in a food bank can have a social return of 10 to 15 euros. It's a lot, and that's why an infrastructure like the food banks, infrastructure in Europe, it's a cheap way to help solve the paradox, because we mainly work through the partnership with private sector, with the food system, and the public support should just help doing it better, doing it more, and explore those parts that are unexplored, or where the barriers are still standing and needs to be removed in order to have more food to reach out to more people. That's why I can see that more people are aware of that. Through awareness, we can get to better solutions.
Thank you so much, Ignazio, for joining us today and for this super fruitful discussion. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Reimagine Agriculture, part of the Recap Project, where we bring forward the voices helping to shape a more sustainable, inclusive, and community driven future for European farming. See you in the next episode.
Thanks to you. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.